Almost all of the peatlands in the country are damaged in one way or another, and those in the Peak District are particularly damaged through past processes like industrial pollution, killing off sphagnum mosses, lots of wildfires in the past. My name's Joe Margetts. I'm a Senior Research and Monitoring Officer with Moors for the Future Partnership, and today we're at the Roaches. This is a site in the southwest part of the Peak District. We've come to have a look at some of the damage that was caused by a wildfire back in 2018, and also talk about some of the conservation efforts that have been made to improve the condition of the site since then. When they become damaged and they lose vegetation cover, they dry out quite rapidly. They're prone to catching fire, and if you think about peat, it's like a fuel, so high carbon content, and it will burn. So that can cause huge amounts of damage, and that can lead to things like water flowing very quickly off the surface of the peat, increasing risk of flooding downstream, reducing the number of plant species, and therefore the general biodiversity of the site. It was quite a nice site before the fire, so there was a fair bit of sphagnum moss at the site and cranberry. There was heather, cotton grasses. It was reasonably diverse for a moorland site in the Peak District, so doing something about that's really vital. So making the site wetter, I guess, is one of the key things that we want to do to make it suitable for bog species, bog specialists, plants and insects, but also protect that peat from future fires, because if it's wet it's a lot harder to burn. Behind where we are now, in the bottom of the bowl, there's quite a wet area, and as the fire went through there was a little island left in the middle in the wettest area that didn't burn, so that was a clear indication of the kind of effect that re-wetting that ground can have. So that's something we're really looking to achieve, not just here but across the peatlands in the Peak District.
BeadaMoss came into existence as part of Micropropagation Services, which is the company that I founded some 40 years ago. We used to micropropagate all sorts of horticultural plants for the trade, and then we moved into propagating native species for peatland restoration around 2000. Those were mostly for a couple of big projects, but we were then asked by Moors for the Future to do a lot of development work how to micropropagate sphagnum. After some years of trying to do that, we managed to develop a technique to produce tiny little sphagnum plants in a small gel bead, which we were then able to distribute on the moors. That was reasonably successful, but the beads were quite intolerant of dry conditions, so the planting time was quite crucial, and they took a very long time to establish and start to grow, although in the long run they were reasonably successful. Meanwhile, we developed cedar hummocks, which are small clumps of sphagnum grown in the glasshouse to 5 to 10 centimetres in length, and those proved very resilient when they were planted on the moors, so they became the standard planting technique for sphagnum on restored peatland. They need to be planted into some sort of vegetation, but given a little bit of protection, they're really very tolerant of conditions on moorland. Over the last few years, we've developed how we produce those hummocks, and we got more efficient at it, and the numbers that we're producing have now increased, so we're doing about 6.5 million a year, and ever increasing, it seems. The starting point of the production process is to obtain very small quantities of sphagnum from a native site, so that wherever we're wanting to replant sphagnum, we'll take samples from that site of all the species that we can get, and those will be brought into our laboratory, identified to ensure that they're the species we think they are, and then we check them again. We have an external checking to make sure that we've got the right species. Those are then put into the biopropagation process and bulked up. That process takes something like 2 years to get to bulk levels, and then they can go into producing the beada hummocks in the glasshouse. Beada hummocks are then taken off the growing medium, rolled into little strips, rolled on either paper, sometimes in plastic, but we prefer paper now because it's biodegradable. They're put in rolls of 20, and 20 rolls are put into a bag so that they can be easily carried onto the moor. So there's been very many challenges in the whole process. Initially trying to get this funny little, very important plant that doesn't have any roots. It's a very small plant, very difficult to grow. To be able to propagate that in quantity quickly enough and efficiently enough so that it's an economic proposition has been really challenging. Our growing media, which is peat-free, it is made up of sphagnum with a little bit of composted bark in it to give it a bit more structure. That growing media, after we've used it, because sphagnum doesn't have roots or anything, it's more or less the same as when we first mixed it. So we're able to collect that growing medium, sterilise it to ensure there's nothing untoward in it, and reuse it a number of times for future production. Sphagnum obviously requires rainwater for growth, so we harvest rainwater from the glasshouse roofs, collect that in large water tanks, filter it to make sure it's nice and clean before it's applied to the sphagnum as a mist for humidification and also for irrigation. Benefits of micropropagated sphagnum are the only real alternative to our production method is to harvest from the wild. Obviously, harvesting from the wild can damage peat bogs that you're actually trying to restore if you're not very careful. And the micropropagated material is in a juvenile state. It's been cleaned up to ensure that there's nothing there that's harmful. The sphagnum, as a consequence of that, grows much more quickly, much more vigorous, establishes really well on the moor, and we're able to supply those hummocks, and you have a pretty much guaranteed survival and rapid growth to restore the moors. We also propagate lots of other moorland species, bilberries, crowberries, heathers, and also very importantly cotton grass. Cotton grass is very important, particularly the common cotton grass, because it rhizomes very well and then holds the peat together. Those rhizomes in the propagation process can be individually separated, and that's how we propagate it. We divide the little clumps of rhizomes up individually to produce robust plugs of cotton grass for planting on the moor. That planting is normally done prior to the sphagnum planting, because the sphagnum loves cotton grass as a structure to grow up and to protect it in the wild. Although our business has expanded quite quickly over the last few years, we still see ourselves very much as a family business. We have families working for us. All our staff are relatively local. We have an ethos of sustainability, and I think all our staff love that idea and that they're contributing in a small way to climate change benefits. I think sphagnum moss is the most important plant in the world. It absorbs CO2 from the atmosphere, locks it up, and provided the moors are kept intact, that CO2 as carbon is stored in the peat for millennium. I'm doing what I'm doing because of the importance to climate change. I believe sphagnum is the critical thing that I can make a contribution to climate change by producing. I would say I would be retired now if it wasn't for sphagnum moss and the importance I attach to sphagnum moss and its propagation for restoring peatlands all over Europe.
So what we do is take one of those, we make a small hole with the dibber in the peat here, and then we just put it in by hand, just pinch it in so it's there. We've done research into the different forms of sphagnum that you can plant, looked at the various different ways of doing it. Certainly for where we work, with the kind of wind and the rain that you get up here, we found that the most likely to succeed and to survive is doing it by hand, which obviously takes a lot of time to do that. A lot of people are needed.
As you can see, the plugs that come from the greenhouses at BeadaMoss are all quite uniform green colour because of the very controlled conditions they've got there. But once they're planted and out in the field, the more characteristic colours of the sphagnum species start to show due to the different light levels and other conditions. So they're really quite beautiful once they start to show their natural forms. I think beyond all the ecosystem services we've talked about, so the wildfire prevention, the flood management, carbon capture, they've got a value in themselves. They're just magical places.
And I think it's that thing that people, in a way, because it's nature, they sort of forget what it used to be like. So maybe, 20 years ago, some of these areas were so barren. There was just whole hillsides of bare peat around the Peat District, that now because they're seeing vegetation there, they kind of don't remember that it used to be like that, just as the people before that used to think all moorland was just a kind of barren wasteland. Now people are seeing it for what it is, but it's also that recognition that it's something that needs to be protected.